Episode 84. This week we cover Hide and Q. One of the Q episodes. Well, the Enterprise is headed to a planet where there is an explosion and there's injuries. Dr. Crusher's got everything all prepared to accept hundreds of potential casualty victims. They're on the way. All of a sudden, the big laser net appears, just like in the Encounter at Farpoint, the very first episode. Immediately, Data and Geordi LaForge are like, oh, it's Q, just like before. And sure enough, there's Q. He's dressed as a admiral. And this time he wants Riker for some reason. He wants to make Riker part of the Q-tinium. So he takes the bridge crew minus Picard down to some planet. They don't know which planet they're on, where it is. It could have been millions of light years away for all they knew. But they get down to this planet, and Q set it up like late 1700s French army camp. He's dressed like a French marshal, and he offers Riker some lemonade. Riker's like, I was just thinking of lemonade. And Q sets him up for this battle. There's what they call animal things. They look like the aliens in the Journey to Babel and later in Enterprise, just dressed as French soldiers. They were carrying muskets, and Tasha Yar apparently made Q mad, so he sent her back to the Enterprise, and he told everyone that she was in a penalty box, and if anyone else broke whatever rules there were, which he didn't spell out for them, they would go into the penalty box, and Tasha Yar would go into nothingness. She'd just be gone. So Tasha's back on the ship. Picard was trying to figure out if he could contact anyone else on board, make a log, anything. He could not. And then Tasha's just there. She's upset. Picard's trying to calm her down. He tells her crying is loud on the bridge now. Then Q arrives, and he's basically calling Picard out for flirting with a subordinate officer, which he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. That was going down. And Q explains that he's going to turn Riker into one of the continuums. Picard doesn't think Riker will accept that. But eventually, Riker and the crew come back to the Enterprise, and then Wesley and Dr. Crusher show up, and then everybody gets ready to go. They go to the planet where they were needed. Riker's been given the powers of the Q, but he doesn't. Or actually, I take that back. They go back to the planet where the battle was taking place. Picard's with them. Yar's with them. They're all there. Worf gets mad, charges after these guys. They kill Worf. Wesley Crusher goes running over, and then they stab Wesley Crusher through with the baton of the musket. Riker uses the power and takes them all back to the Enterprise. And Picard ends up making Riker promise not to use the power of the Q anymore because he's afraid of what could happen. He's a little bit intimidated by Riker. They get to the planet where the casualties are. They discover a dead little girl buried under this rubble. Data's like, well, if you have the power of the Q, maybe you can do something. And Riker's like, promised I wouldn't. And Crusher's like, I don't understand. Are you saying you can save her? And he's like, nope, made a promise. And so they just leave the little girl dead. Riker doesn't use his powers. They go back to the ship. And then Q, of course, shows back up. Riker wants to give everyone a gift. He's starting to become of the opinion he should have the power. He wants to be one of the Q now. So he turns Wesley 10 years older. So Wesley Crusher's like a different actor, but they dubbed Will Wheaton's voice in. He gives the Klingon woman to Worf. He gives Geordi his sight, and Data refuses to have anything to do with it. He doesn't want to become human, which was what Riker was going to do. Worf ends up rejecting the Klingon woman. Wesley Crusher on his own decides he doesn't want to be 10 years older. And Geordi LaForge doesn't want to have to thank Q for having the ability to see, so he rejects his eyesight. Riker's like, huh, that's really strange, I don't get it, but okay. And Picard's like, see, I told you they wouldn't want your powers, and Riker's like, I guess you were right after all, I guess I'll reject them. Q tries to talk Riker into keeping the powers. Riker says no. Picard's like, ha, told you so, Q. And that was basically it. So, Riker had the power of the Q for a while, ultimately rejected it, and then Q never really messed with Riker a whole lot. There's an episode of Voyager years and years later where Q brought Riker to Voyager for just a quick minute, but outside of that, not a ton where they interacted. Some interesting notes in this one. No Counselor Troi in the episode. They did a quick dialogue in the captain's log at the very, very start of the episode saying they had dropped Counselor Troi off so she could catch a shuttle to go visit her family on Beta Z. This was one of a few episodes where Marina Sirtis, who played Troi, wasn't involved. She thought she was being fired when they didn't use her for a few episodes, but she ultimately stayed on and was there through the entire run of The Next Generation. It was also the first time we saw Geordi LaForge with normal eyes. They either had the visor covering his eyes or they used white contact lenses to show how he was blind. For a couple of minutes he had just normal eyes, his own actual eyes. Also, like I said, they dubbed Will Wheaton's voice into the show, but they had a different actor portraying the older Wesley Crusher. So there was also that. And I believe it was the first time where there was a civilian casualty on The Next Generation when they got to that planet too late to save that little girl, and Riker wouldn't use the power because he had promised Picard. It was also the first time we heard Will Riker call Captain Picard by his first name, which surprised Picard and kind of irritated him. They even referenced that. Picard's like, oh, so we're on a first name basis. Of course, later in the series, it wasn't a big deal when Riker would use his first name, but it was shocking at this point, apparently. Also, the first instance of a Klingon female in The Next Generation. We'll see one few episodes down the road, but this was the first female Klingon. So, pretty much episode 84